Guys, if you've ever printed your own images from one of those cheaper places or a home printer, but what I mean by the cheaper places, not hand printing, but when you take it to a Walmart or a Costco or a Kmart here in Australia or Officeworks, where it's you hand over the files and the machine actually spits out the images, you can often be disappointed by how different the images on your screen look to the images that you get printed. Now, it can be really costly especially if you're doing larger images, that you have to continue to get the larger image reprinted. So what if there was a way that you could determine what the actual correct exposure was for the image and what sort of adjustments you need to make and how to correct the image that you see on the screen so that the image that you get printed is going to look really good. So what I've come up with, and this is based on my years working in dark rooms 1,000 years ago, and this is what we used to do in the dark room before we actually did the print. We used to do these test strips as well. So, basically what we would do is do a series of different exposures. And so this is something that you can set up with your prints, and hopefully you only need to do this a couple of times before you get a general idea of how much you need to compensate your images to make sure that they look good coming out of these machine print places. And so there's a couple of different ways I do this. So there's this way, and then also I'm going to show you a way that I use if you're going to print a larger image and you want to just see a smaller section. But before I start on that, there is a number of factors that you need to look at before you're actually looking at what the correct exposure is, and that has to do with resizing your image and also making sure that you've got the correct color profile. Now, if you've already covered color profiles and you've got an understanding of that and resizing images, then just skip ahead to 29 minutes and 30 seconds and I'll run you through how to do these test strips. Whenever you're looking at an image on a screen, that image has an assigned color space. Now, the color space is the number of colors you tell your computer or camera or smartphone to create your images with. Now, there's three more popular kinds or widely used color spaces that you'll see used in Lightroom and Photoshop and by printing companies. So there's sRGB, Adobe RGB, and Pro Photo. Now, out of these, and they're all very different in the way that they show colors in an image. Pro Photo has the most colors. So if you look at the three jars, I'm representing the colors by jelly beans in a jar. So just imagine that the amount of colors that each profile is going to give you, or the gamut or the range of colors that each profile is going to give you, is represented by numbers of jelly beans. So Pro Photo RGB gives you as a color profile. If you assign that color profile that you want to work in that color profile, it's going to give you the most colors, and it also requires that you work in 16-bit files, and it also doubles your file size. Pro Photo RGB is going to be used by extremely high-end commercial printers. They're the only ones who can actually reproduce all the colors that you see in this particular color profile. So unless you're going to have your images used, say in the Guggenheim or the National Portrait Gallery, and you want your images to look amazing, then go nuts, work in Pro Photo. If that's not the case, you're pretty safe to go with the next one down, which is Adobe RGB. It still has a really broad tonal range, and by tonal range I mean that like there's going to be lots and lots of different choices of blues. There'll be lots and lots of different choices of reds and greens, and all the different colors will be represented in your image, and you'll get lots of rich and beautiful colors that a printer is able to reproduce. So most high-end or pro printers use the color profile Adobe RGB. Now, finally, there is sRGB, and this is the color profile most commonly used by the lower end or cheap printing labs. So something like a Kmart or a Walmart use the sRGB color profile, and also most low end scanners and printers and entry-level cameras have this particular color profile in them. So what it means is when you're working in sRGB, you're going to have a much narrower range of colors available to you. It's not going to have the wide gamut of colors that, say, something like Adobe RGB offers, and certainly nowhere near the amount of colors that you'll get in something like a Pro Photo RGB. So it's always best to check what, and ask the question when you're doing when you're sending out a print, ask the printing company, what color profile do you use? And that means when you're creating prints to go to that particular printing company, you want to work on your print in the same color profile so that what you're seeing on your screen looks the same as what they're going to be printing their end. So that's a couple of things on color profile. So basically all it is it's a universal standard. It's like a common language that all computers and printers share, that means that everyone who is looking at the image, if they're all having the same color profile, they're all speaking the same language. Now, to check the color profile and make sure that you've got the correct color profile set, when you're working in Lightroom, just go up to Preferences. Okay, so it's just under the tab where it says Lightroom, and you go down to Preferences and you go 3 tabs across. So it's External Editing, and you come down here to Color Space, and the default is usually set to Pro Photo RGB, and as I said, that is a color space that most of the colors you're not going to see anyway. So at the moment, it's a waste of time using it. So I would stick to using Adobe RGB. Edit all your files, do all your editing in Adobe RGB. That's how you export your files. All right, and make sure that you have the same settings in when you go to export the file. So when you're going File, Export, you've got that little dialog box that comes in. Make sure that it will tell you where File Setting, you'll have the type of image you want to export, whether it's JPEG, PSD, TIFF, DNG, or the original, and then you've got the color space. Make sure that you have Adobe RGB set as the color space. So that is for printing. If the lab specifies that if you're getting your prints done at a lower end printing place and they tell you that they're printing in sRGB, then you want to be exporting your images to sRGB for printing. So change the color space. It's going to make the amount of colors available to you less, and it will match up a lot better on your screen to their screen, and you should get a better looking print that way. Hey guys, this is a tutorial to show you how to resize your images and create a custom border for printing using Photoshop. Now, I've got this image here of Roberto that I have now completed, and let's say that I want to crop this image to a custom size, and I've got my crop tool open, so that's it right there, the crop overlay. And if I go down here, I've got a drop down menu and I've got a number of choices that I might want to pick. But let's just say I want to crop this in a custom way, and it's going to be a way that a size that I'll be using often. So I want to create a custom size, and I want to output that as a final size with borders so that when I print it onto custom paper, it's going to have the borders that I need. So let's just say I want to create my own custom size. There's an option here to do that. So I can enter custom, and let's just say I want to make this 16 inches across, by 5 inches. All right, so I can do that, and now Lightroom will create that custom for me. And if I look down here in my custom, in the drop down menu here, you can see that that custom size has now been added. So that's how you add your own custom sizes. So let me just get rid of that. All right, so I've come back to my original, and the custom that I want to add for this one is 11 by 14. So I've clicked on that, and now Lightroom has given me the crop dimensions of 11 inches on the short edge by 14 inches across. And now it's just a matter of working out where I want to position that. So about there looks good to me. I just want to avoid that rubbish there in the background. Okay, so happy with that. That's all really straightforward. Now I want to show you how you can create an action to customize the rest of it and make it just one click. So if I go on, right click on the image, hit edit in Photoshop. Okay, I want to edit a copy with the Lightroom adjustments, hit edit. And I'm now going to open that up in Photoshop. All right, so here's my image open in Photoshop. Now there's a couple of ways to make a custom border for an image in Photoshop. The first way I'm going to show you, I think, is overly complicated, and the way I think and problem solve, it just doesn't work for me because it's fiddly. But you might be the kind of person that likes precise measuring and all of that, and may find that this works for you. So I've got my image open. I'm going to duplicate it, and I'm also going to create under the duplicate image a new empty layer, which is going to be my border. So I'm going to hit edit, fill, and fill with white. All right, so basically what I've got is I've got my top image, I've got another layer underneath which is white, and then I've got my original image. So with my top image, if I hit Command T, it'll bring up the little bounding boxes there, and I can grab onto one of these handles, and holding down Shift at the same time, it's going to allow me to upscale or downscale my image. Now, it's not actually changing the resolution or doing anything like that. It's just allowing me to position the image into place. So I could say I wanted to print on an 11 by 14 mat, which is what I have here, that's what my image size is, I can, and that's what I want to use as my background, and let's say I wanted to have a little border here, I can create something like this, but then I've got to be quite accurate in the way I place it, and you can sort of get that wrong, and this is just so much fiddling around, but if you like doing that, then that's fine. And you've got all these, you can enter in the width and the height into these little boxes here if you want to do it that way, but this just annoys me to do. So that's one way of doing it, but that's effectively what needs to happen to create a border around your images. The image itself needs to be made a little bit smaller, and then somehow we need to create a border around that image so that the final size is the print size is still 11 inches by 14, but we've added a border. So I'm going to show you how I do it. So I'm going to get rid of that and get rid of that. All right, so my process is the exact same principle of what I just showed you. It's just another way of doing it, and you'll find as you learn more and more about Lightroom and Photoshop, there are many different ways to do the same thing. They all work, and it's like photography. There is more than one way that you can light a portrait. It works. It's just a matter of finding the process that suits your way of thinking. And so this particular process works for my brain somehow. So what I'm doing effectively is I have the image itself has already been cropped, and the size is 11 inches by 14 inches. What I want to do is add a 1/4 inch border. Now, if I was to just go ahead and add that to the image, my file size then becomes 11.5 inches by 14.5 inches, which is not the right size for the print. So what I do is I make my image a little bit smaller, and then I increase the canvas size. Anyway, this is how I do it. So I come down to the drop down menu, image size, and I've got a width of 14 inches and a height of 11. So and you have to do a bit of math here, but what I'm doing is I'm going to make my width now 13.5 inches, and that means that the height will be for the image to scale properly, 10.6 inches. All right, so I've made it smaller, and I've taken a 1/4 inch off each edge to scale, and now I'm going to add my border back in. So you go image, canvas size. And so now I'm adding a white border around the edge, and now I just replace 14 and 11 and you can choose whatever color canvas you want. So there's some already entered. White, black, gray is the default, or you can have a different color. I'm going with white for this, and I press OK. And now I've got a 1/4 inch border around my image to scale. So it's going to be a little bit more at the edge. Now you can change that. You can make that an inch border or a 2-inch border, still within that 11 by 14 paper dimension. Now that's a fiddly thing to have to do if you're doing it for, let's say you've got 100 images that you want to resize to this size. So there is a way that you can create an action that does it all in one click, and you can actually create an entire set of actions so that you can have different paper sizes, different border widths, and it's still going to be a one-click action. Okay, so to record an action, I need to go into my action panel and click on that. Now, if you don't see it here in your panel, go into Window and look down and just click on Actions. There it is there, and that'll bring it up. And then if your workspace looks a little bit different to mine in Photoshop, make sure that you've got the photography workspace clicked as well, so that might make it a bit easier to follow along. So I've got my Actions panel open, and you can see that I've got all of mine organized into folders. So I've got like client actions, I've got my sharpening actions, and I have already some image resize, and I've got textures, borders, I've got the skin retouch pack that you guys would have, highlight and contour, I've got a true grit pack, and all my different duotones, cinematic actions, and I like to keep them all organized into folders. It just makes life a lot easier to find each action. So you can see here down at the bottom, I've created a custom print action folder, and if I click on that, all my actions are listed here. So I've already recorded an 11 by 14 1/4-inch border action, and I'm going to show you just how quickly and easily it works. And most of you would have played around with some of the Photoshop actions I've shared with you, but like, it's one click, that's it, it was done. You blink and you miss it. So let me just undo that. I'll just click on that again, play, done. You know, a second. So this is why it's worth doing. So let's just undo that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get rid of that, and I'm going to make a new set of actions so you can see exactly the process in recording that, and then you've got them for yourself. And whenever you do something repetitive that you know you're going to need, you can actually record an action or a group of actions and have that at your fingertips. It's just a lifesaver. So I've got my actions panel selected. Over here in the far right, there is a little icon with the lines through it. If I click on that, it'll drop down, and I'm going to come down to new set, because what I want to do whenever I'm making new actions, I want to put them into their own folder, or if I want to, I can just create a new action, and by default it'll go into the default actions, which is if you forget to put it into a folder, that's where the action will be. So I'm going to new set, and I'm going to name that custom print resize. So that covers, actually I'll just call it custom print. There we go. Okay, so there is my new folder. Currently there is nothing in it, but I've got a new folder, and now if I select that folder and create a new action, it will be placed into that folder. So once I've got my folder created, I'm going to go back to the drop down menu, and I'm going to select new action, and I'm going to name that action exactly what it is that the action does. And I find that if I'm as specific as possible and as basic in my naming as possible, it's going to be easier for me to find that in a year or 2 years down the track. So in this case, it is 11 by 14, and then it's 1/4-inch border. And then I hit record, and what Photoshop will do once I hit record is everything I do to this image, Photoshop is going to record that action, and once it's finished, I press stop, and it'll save everything that you've done to that action, and when you apply that to another image, it will apply everything that you did in that order to the next image. So that's basically what an action is, and they're lifesavers. So what's important when you're recording an action is, in this case, that the file is open, because where you're going to have issues is if you ask Photoshop to open the file in a specific folder, the next time you play that action on an image, if it's not in that specific file where you first recorded the action, Photoshop isn't going to be able to find the image, and it's going to not be happy and throw a tantrum, and it won't work. So start with the image already open before you hit record. All right, so we're going to hit record. You don't need to rush this. It'll record. You can take your time. It's not going to record it in real time. So if it takes you 10 minutes to work out what the steps you're doing for this particular action, it's not going to take 10 minutes to apply that to the next image. It speeds it all up. All right, so I've got my name. It's going into my custom print set. I hit record. And now I'm going to do exactly what I just did in the demonstration earlier to this image. So I'm going to go, all right, so I'm going to go to image size. And so the original file size is 14 inches by 11 inches. That's what we did to the image in Lightroom. And so now I need to reduce that to 13.5 by whatever it scales by at that size, which happens to be 10.6. So I hit OK. So that's now made the image smaller. Now I'm going to come back and add the canvas size, which is 14 by 11. Okay, that's all I want to do. I'm not going to hit save or anything. I'm just going to hit stop. And so now I've got an action has been recorded. So I just want to show you. I'll just go back and undo what I've just done, and let's check that action's working. So I'm going to come into my custom print, and I'm going to click on the 11 by 14 inch border action that I've just created, and I'm going to hit play, and done. Bang, like that. So that's creating an action, and that's applying it to a single file. Now you can go ahead and record whatever sort of border width that you want. You just got to work out the math and stick to the sizes that work best for you. But I've also recorded one with a 1/4 inch border, which I think is a bit easier to see what I'm doing. So I've added that to my image. Now, remember how we started this tutorial is I opened the image from Lightroom, and I'm now in Photoshop. Here's where it gets really cool. If I now go ahead and press File Save or Command S on that image, what Photoshop does is it saves the image back into Lightroom, the adjustment that I have now made, and it is now, if I open up Lightroom, here's my original. There it is. So now you can continue working with your files, and if you have other custom images that you've created in Lightroom, they are now all in the one spot. So it's a 2-second detour into Photoshop, right click, open the image, hit that action, put the border on, press save, and it comes back into Lightroom. All right, so this is how I prepare my images for prints, particularly when I'm just using one of those cheaper labs where it's basically you do it all yourself. So it's just short of having a printer yourself without having to maintain one. So this is my image and I've edited it. It's looking the way I want it. I think it looks good on screen, but I'm not going to know that until what it looks like as a print until I actually get it printed. So when I'm dealing with larger prints and I want to enlarge this to 16 inches by 20 inches, I don't want to be printing 4 or 5 versions to get the right image. It ends up being very expensive. So what I do is, first of all, I need to resize that image to the actual print size and make sure I've got the correct color profile. So what I'm going to do first of all is convert the color profile. So I go in Photoshop, edit, convert to profile. Now, currently the profile, the source space, Adobe RGB 1998. That is the color profile that I would deliver to advertising clients and high-end clients that are going to print these images in magazines. But I'm going to have a go at printing this image at one of the lower end, sort of your equivalent of a Walmart or a Costco or a Kmart in Australia, or even Officeworks, and they don't do too bad a job. So the color profile that they use is sRGB. So I need to make sure that the color profile I'm working in matches the color profile that they're working in. So I've converted the profile. Okay, and the next thing I need to do is make sure that my image is the right size, exactly the right size to what I want to print to. So I know that I'm printing to a full size 16-inch by 20-inch print. And I know already that my actual file is a little bit wider than that, but that's okay. So what I'm going to do is image size. Little dialog box comes up, and I want to make sure, I know my width is going to be a little bit wider and I'm going to have to crop. Or you can do that trick that I showed you earlier where you might have to resize your image and have a white border around it. But I want this image to fill the frame and no white border. So in that instance, I'm going to make sure that the height is 16 inches. That's the maximum height of that paper. And when I do that, because it's got that little chain that linked, the width is going to be to scale, so it's going to be a little bit wider, so I'm not going to need to crop a little bit either side, and that's okay. And resolution is 300, and then hit OK. All right, so there's my image there, and I'm going to actually crop it to size. So when I hit the crop key, you can see that you've got these templates already loaded up, and I want to make sure that I've got the right crop located. So I'm going to put it in here, 16 by 20. All right, and now you can see that that's vertical. So what I can do is just hit these arrows here, and now it's the vertical crop. And now all I need to do is just move my crop points. I'll put her on that third of the frame there, and then hit enter. Wait, undo, yes, delete cropped pixels, hit OK. So I've resized my image, and now what I want to do is not have to print this 20 times and go back and forth to get it right. I want to create some form of test print where I can see how it's looking at all the different exposures by tweaking the exposures slightly. So what I want to do is choose a critical area. So in this case, the image, everything that's going on that I'm interested in is basically about her skin tone and the highlights on the clothes. So that's what I want to make sure that I'm testing when I do my test print, and I don't want to do a whole lot of 16-inch by 20-inch test prints. So the workaround is to just do a series of 8 by 10 images of the main area. So what I'm going to do is use the marquee tool to just draw around the main area there, which is the face, and I've got a fixed ratio of 8 by 10. So that's the area now that I'm going to be doing multiple test prints of. So once I've got the image selected, what I'm going to do is hit Command J, and you can see if I take away the background, basically what I've created is a standalone version of just that section, and that's all I'm going to print. So basically I'm saving myself a lot of money just by doing a smaller print of that exact area, and I can see exactly what's going on. So what I like to do is just keep this all a little bit organized. So I'm just going to turn off that bottom layer so you can see that. So what I like to do is just with the type tool is just put in what each layer is. So this one is no adjustment. So I'll call that 0. All right. So that's the actual original file that's going to go in the mix. I just want to keep everything nice and tidy. So I want to keep all the little different layers that I'm going to be creating into a group. So I'm going to highlight the new layer that you can see there and the type tool, and then Command G will group those into their own layer, and I can now rename that just by that will allow me. I can call that layer 0. All right, so now I've got the first layer, and now what I'm going to do is repeat that exercise. So I've got my, we'll turn this one off, and I've got my marquee tool selected. And if you want to have everything nice and uniform, just make sure to do 5 duplicates of this layer to start with, and that keeps it all nice and uniform. So, okay, so now I've selected that area again. I'm going to get my text tool, and this time I'm going to do half a stop underexposed. So I will make sure that I name it first. So it's minus, I've got my text tool selected. So it's minus 0.5. All right, and just make sure that I can see that. Okay, and then what I'm going to do is I've got this layer selected, my new layer. I'm going to come down and hit the exposure, and again I want to do minus 0.5. Okay, and it'll already, the exposure slider will underexpose that image. Now I don't want, I only want that to affect this particular layer, so I make sure that I clip this exposure adjustment layer to the layer underneath. Now, it's like, it feels like, oh my God, you're going to so much trouble just to work out what a print would look like. But believe me, this is going to save you so much time and expense, and you'll actually get it right every time. That once you've got this set up, you can actually use this setup for your next print. Just take out the single images and keep the structure the same, and that can be your test print template. All right, so now with all the 3 layers selected, so it's the type layer, the adjustment layer, and the underexposed layer, Command G, group them and rename them 0, so it's minus 0.5. All right, so I've got that. So I've got my 0 layer, I've got my minus half a stop under, and now I'm going to do, so I'll turn that off. So again, I'll do my selection, And now what I do is I just work through each different layer. So I'll show you one that's I've already done, so you don't need to sit there and watch me do every one. So I've got +1 is the top one, then it's plus 0.5, -1, -0.5, and 0. So now what I do is each one of those images, I export the single image as it is, as a print, and I've got 5 different test prints that I can then take to the lab and get printed, and then I can easily see at a glance when I get them back, I lay them out and I can see that it's actually the print that is what looks great on my screen is no adjustments, looks great, but I'm not factoring in that my screen is backlit, the prints chew up more ink, and I actually need to print these at half a stop, extra exposure, so I know that that's the one that I'm going to print. The correct one is +5. That's where it looks the best. And so now I go back to my image, my original image that I started with, and I increase the exposure by half a stop, 0.5, and I will get the exact result that I see on my screen, and I know exactly what I'm doing. So as I said, sounds like a lot of trouble to go through, but well worth it if you want to get great looking images. If you happen to have an image that is uniform throughout and you don't have, like, it's a landscape or something like that, you don't need to do the little images. What you can do is just do one larger print and divide it into sections. So what I do is it's very similar. So I just divide it into sections. So what I've done here, I've already resized my image. And if you want, if you're not seeing what I'm seeing and you want to create a work path that is also measured in inches to match the actual print sizes, what you do is go into preferences, units and rulers, and you can change it from pixels to inches or centimeters or millimeters. So for this sake of this exercise, it's just easier for me to see what my file looks like on the screen in inches rather than centimeters or millimeters. So that's where you do it, and hit OK. And then if you don't see these rulers and guides, just go to Window, and it should be View, sorry. Make sure you've got rulers ticked, so when I untick it, you see they go away. Bring them back, and also make sure that you've got extras ticked. That's the guides. So if I untick those, they go away. And if you want to bring those onto the image, there is a great way for you to line up your files and things like that. You just bring your mouse over to the edge of the screen, hover it over the ruler, and it'll just grab onto a guide that way. All right, so, and again, with this, what I've done is and if you want to zero your ruler, what you do is you just take your cursor into the corner, grab it there, and just bring it over the corner of your image, and that'll zero it. So you see the counter starts at 0 at the edge of the image and 0 down here, and that just makes life a lot easier for you to measure up your files and divvy them up. Now, you don't even need to be this precise. You can just make 5 stripes down the middle of the image and make them look near enough, because basically what you're going to do is repeat the exercise that I showed you with this image, but this time what you're doing is you're going to increase all the stages. So it's exactly the same steps, and I'll show you here. So what I did is you can start with, so I've got +1, which is one stop overexposed the image. Then I've got half a stop over, and I've got 0 there in the middle. I've got -5, minus half a stop, and -1 stop. So it goes from darker to lighter, with 0 being the neutral. So I've got the different tests there, and I've done exactly the same thing. So you take your section, copy it, adjust the exposure, and make sure that you've got something written above that shows you what each one is, because otherwise you're going to end up confused. So you can see easily at a glance. So all I need to do now is do one single file, print that out, and I'll be able to see which section looks the best out of the image. So this is, I think, a really good way to nail that. And what you'll find is that you'll see what the default setting is, and hopefully you shouldn't have to do this every time you need to get prints done. You might know that, okay, I know they look good at 0 on my computer, but when I'm printing at this particular lab, I need to overexpose them by half a stop so that they look great as a print for a particular paper. And you can narrow it down, and you can get really nerdy and geek out as much as you like, but I think this will save you a lot of time, a lot of stress, and a lot of money doing it this way.